Welcome back, everyone, to hour number 2 of Back Your Play with Q, a Monday edition. Check us out on the YouTube channel at Rich Q on Q. Follow us on social media as well, IG, Twitter, at Rich Q on Q. Our guy, Jovan Alford, give him a follow as well, at Jovan10. Does a really nice job handicapping, breaking down a lot of the game's fantasy football as well, doing some good work for FTN Bets. And of course, the pod out there, totalsportslive.com, joins us throughout the NFL season. So we've got Monday Night Football tonight, recap some of the action. The games on Sunday, they were wild, right? I mean, you think about a lot of the overs we're hitting. I got some numbers I want to share with you, but it was all about those road dogs going into week 2. And I actually deemed it must win for Giants, Buffalo, Cincinnati, Denver. We got a couple of those teams to show up. To show up in the second half, that was. But how about your overall view and assessment 2 weeks in, even though we still have the double dip tonight on Monday Night Football?
2 weeks in, I think overall, I think we're starting to see teams kind of figure it out. Like, I think week 1 was kind of that extension of the
Yep.
preseason because a lot of teams didn't play a lot of their starters. And we saw, like you said, that's why the under was hitting so much in week 1, because I think everybody was trying to figure out, like, just get back in that game speed and try to figure out like what's working, what's not working. And then like we saw in, week 2, starting with the Eagles and the Vikings, and it just kind of poured over into Sunday. A lot of points being scored. Offenses starting to catch up and pour it on. So I thought, for the most part, I thought it was a pretty good week 2.
When you look at this Eagles squad, 2 weeks now, somewhat slow out of the gate. A win is a win in the NFL. We know that, but they haven't been ripping through teams like we thought they were, or maybe everything broke right, especially early on for them, 8-9 weeks into last season. Different animal this year. Patriots playing them tough. Minnesota, Captain Kirk put up the big numbers. They just had a couple of mistakes. And I can't stand the pylon rule. I mean, that's just, please outlaw that as well. But again, they're 2-0. It looks like Maddox is going to be out for this season. So some concerns right there from your corner position, your DBs and whatnot. Where are you at right now with the Eagles? Again, granted, it's only 2 weeks in, but let's start with the offense. Any cause for concern here with this offense?
If I would say no. I feel like the offense is starting to, just talking about just the NFL in general. I think the offense, is starting to figure out its identity and figuring out like, hey, you're not a pass first, run second team, and I think that's what they were trying to do. In week 1 with Belichick, like trying to like establish the passing game because you have so many weapons that you can lean on and depend on. But I think in week 2 they got back to what worked for them last season, which was pound the ball, run the rock. They did a great job, of getting DeAndre Swift involved because he wasn't really involved in week 1. And we saw how, them like really, because Brian Flores, you could kind of think, and you kind of just look at how Minnesota's defense kind of played it. They were kind of making sure they did not get beat over the top. Like, keep everything in front, let's sit on the quarterback running game too, which I thought Eagles did a great job of getting away from that because I think they've been so persistent on trying to get that quarterback run game going, and Minnesota just gave them the running lane. So I think they figured out like, hey, like if we establish the run first, then the passing game will start to open itself up, and I think that will continue. Now, granted, you're going against 3 teams that have a few good guys, that can call some defense, right? Belichick, Flores, now Todd Bowles coming up on Monday night. So that is a challenging, first few, especially for an offensive coordinator, coming from the quarterback coach to the offensive coordinator. So I think for them, it's just going to be, just continuing establishing that running game and trying to figure out their running back rotation too, because there was no Gainwell. So there wasn't so much you had to figure out the rotation. Now, if Gainwell comes back and he's healthy, how do you mix and match him and Swift and Boston Scott, and if Rashad Penny is even, active for week 3?
But they probably thought Gainwell was going to be the featured back if you go by depth chart, right? And the fact that you had Penny inactive the first week of the season, and then Swift got the bulk of the carry. He's a nice back, not top 5, 6, 7 like people are trying to make him out to be. Early line, Eagles are laying 6 on the road against a Tampa Bay team that's starting the season off 2-0. I mean, think about it. Tampa Bay 2-0. Washington, which is a surprise, a very big surprise, 2-0 to start the season. So we'll get into that. We've got the double dip with Monday night. Any issue with the whole AJ Brown wanting the ball? I mean, listen, there are some days where you're not going to be able to get your targets. They were running the ball roughshod through Minnesota's porous run defense. If it ain't broke, you don't try to fix it.
Right.
I know Sirianni kind of downplayed it, but sometimes you start to see that, and it almost has this, sometimes it can manifest itself going forward, especially if the offense continues to be a little slow out of the gate.
Right. If it was Ryan Tannehill, then maybe you might have a cause for concern. But I think because him and Jalen have that close, relationship and just friendship, I think, we see, like we said, a star wide receiver venting his concerns why he's not getting the ball. And I think after it happened, there was a drive where they tried to get the ball to him and actually scored a touchdown, but it was called back because of a Rashad Penny holding call. So I think if, going into this game, I think we'll probably see, if I had to be a betting man, probably see a lot of AJ Brown in this one, just because that Bucs secondary has given up some passing yards, between Captain Kirk and even Fields is able to hit on some plays there. So I got to think AJ Brown, he hasn't found the end zone yet. It's been really Devontae Smith. So maybe AJ can.
Yeah. And of course, after he bitched and complained, they target him 3 times. I mean, come on, man. They did. I mean, enough is enough, right? You're winning, and that's right. The most important thing in the NFL. All right. Washington had them on the money line. That was a crazy game, right? Because I still believe Russell Wilson's cooked. And if you listen to Sean Payton, he wants a quarterback. I feel as though no one's really talking about this. I don't want to get your thoughts on this. He wants a quarterback that is a pure pocket passer, because all those years, who did he have? He had Drew Brees, right?
Brees.
So now you've got Russell, and to his credit, Russ was cooking that last play. Washington, horrible defense, just friggin' knock it down, will you? But still, Russ wants to take off and run, not out of necessity. I just think that's who he is right now. He's not comfortable in the pocket. He's taking a lot of shots, a lot of sacks. I still maintain if it really goes south, and through 2 weeks, it looks like it will, he's going to get benched. I feel as though Sean Payton's running out of patience with Russell Wilson. And I think maybe he was under the guise of, hey, I'm going to come in and this quarterback's going to do it the way I want him to do it. And that's not the case. Right. And that's not who Russell Wilson is and or his personality. But the flip side of that, Washington got the win. When their defense is healthy and they make plays, I mean, Sweat was all over the freaking place yesterday. Tackles for loss and interruptions and the hits. And I mean, just a man-child. But it goes back to what I believe I said to you and other guests on BYP earlier, before the season started. If Washington starts off on a nice little run and the offense is putting up points, you know who that's a credit to? Eric Bieniemy.
Yep.
And I remember I got such backlash for that. And I'm saying to myself, this is what you want, even if they're losing, because eventually, if they do get rid of Ron Rivera, Bieniemy's going to slide right in there. So are you buying Washington right now, 2 weeks in, or a nice little story, had a couple nice little wins, you beat a bad Arizona team and you beat a bad Denver team?
I think with Washington, I think there is some positives to take away from, like you, specifically the offense, right? Eric Bieniemy coming in, and people got to forget he doesn't have like a Patrick Mahomes, right? Nope. He has Sam Howell, that was only his third career start. Having him tossing the ball around, the field and like just slinging around, he's actually, making some plays. You see the running game getting involved. Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson, like really making this offense a little bit more explosive, which I think we probably thought they could have been explosive last year, even with Carson Wentz, but it was with the piece they had, but just not the right offensive mind to do it. Yep. And now you have a guy that can do it and put, the McLaurins, the Jahan Dotsons in that space to be, explosive to make plays. So I got to say offensively, really good. Defensively, giving up 30-something points is not, ideal. But, I mean, hey, again, it's early in the season. You're still figuring out. You got, like you said, you got to expect, right? You got Chase Young back. That's going to help in that defensive line, with Jonathan Allen, with Sweat. They can continue to get after the quarterback. You have a pretty good secondary, that has Emmanuel Forbes back there that can make plays, and Cam Curl. So Washington 2-0, you got to say, right? Like, even though it weren't the most impressive wins, they went out and beat who they were supposed to beat.
Yeah, Dallas and San Fran, I both tease them, as I told you before we came on. Dallas, I mean, um, with my buddies, we do a lot of picks just for fun. I actually took the Jets, not to even hedge it, to win the game outright. And Zach Wilson stinks. I mean, he just can't play. I mean, we already know that. And if you're the Jets, and I put it out on Twitter at Rich Q on Q, I mean, listen, you've got to either go after Foles, maybe even call the Eagles about Mariota, maybe even call Minnesota about Kirk Cousins, or go after Ginger Jesus. I mean, Carson Wentz is sitting there right on the. I mean, you want to try to salvage the season right
Mm-hmm.
now, but all this nonsense about, hey, this is going to be the 78 Steelers, 2000 Ravens, 85 Bears. That defense got just absolutely taken to the woodshed. I mean, mauled yesterday. Doesn't help that the quarterback throws 3 picks in the fourth quarter, but I'm more impressed with the Dallas Cowboys because I thought Sunday night to open up the season against the Giants, they went down the field, and then we don't have to rehash it because I'm just going to get friggin' annoyed. And then it just basically imploded for the Giants, but they manhandled them. They sacked Daniel Jones to the tune of 7 times, 7 sacks. But man, Parsons and the linebackers and these guys flying around the football. I mean, I'm looking at Dallas's schedule, and it really, really, really pains me to say this, but they're going to be favored. I mean, just going forward, even if you look at this from a betting standpoint, think about these next games. They've got Arizona, they've got New England, they've got San Francisco on the road. Depending upon what San Francisco does, maybe I can see an even pick 'em, maybe a point here and
Yeah.
there, right?
Yeah. 1.5 at most.
The Chargers, the Rams, and then on the road, Philly. So they'll be tested 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games twice in the first 8 weeks. And if they get through San Fran and or split with the Eagles, you're looking at a 7-1 start. Then they've got the Giants, Carolina, Washington, Seattle. This team can have the type of start that the Eagles had last year before they lost to Washington.
Yeah.
Right? And they're going to be favored in a substantial amount of games. And man, I'll tell you, I mean, is this defense legit right now? Do you look at the Dallas Cowboys and say, hey, man, after 2 weeks overreaction Monday, I have to say they're right there with the Eagles. And maybe even more so because the Eagles, that offense has been a little slow and right there against the 49ers.
Yeah, I think you have to. I think, again, granted, you look at the quarterbacks they face, there's not, the Mahomes and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
no
But
doubt.
again, you go out, no, you still go out and handle your business against
Yep,
those guys and you get turnovers. And I think that's been the biggest thing about this defense. They just been getting turnovers and
yep.
just
Very
making teams
opportunistic.
pay when they get those turnovers. And then offensively, I think if you're a Cowboys fan, you have to be happy that Dak Prescott isn't turning over the ball because that was the big issue last year, right? Every time Dak was on the field, he was at least throwing one interception a game. He was just turning the ball over, and he's been a great job being efficient, which has led to a bunch of points, which that's not, I mean, for all of us that have watched Cowboys over the last 3 seasons, that's not been the issue, right? Dave can put up points and have these big
Yeah,
games where they're blowing teams out and things like that. It's going to be, after, like you said, they're going to have a few tests in the next 8 or so games, but it's going to be what can they do in November and December when the games start to really matter and things like that. And I think that's going to be a test. But right now, if you can, like the Eagles did last year, right? If you can build up that type of schedule and build up those wins to where you're, like you said, you're 7-1 if you split between San Fran and the Eagles, and the Cowboys definitely want to get back at San Fran for beating them
yep.
twice in the playoffs in the last 2 years. If you can sweep or even better split, I mean, 7-1, you'll be a Cowboys
You'll
fan
take
that
it.
puts you in the
Yeah.
driver's seat for that number 1 seed.
So Saquon Barkley's injured. Joe Burrow's banged up. I mean, listen, the Giants, we'll get to Cincy, who was, as you know, my AFC representative in the Super Bowl against my Lions. Listen, the Giants, I don't know what the hell was happening for a half. You watch a game like that, and as a fan, you sit there and say, just get a score, figure out a way to get back in the game. I don't know what
Yes.
the hell Dable said during the half, But the fact that they came out right away, went deep to Hyatt, got him involved. Waller, we saw Saquon making plays. He's going to be out for about 3 weeks. I don't think this is a playoff team. I thought coming in, they would be good on offense and take a step back. I still see them as a 7-8, maybe if it breaks for them, 9-win team. I tweeted out if they're 6-5 by the break, by their bye, I would sign up for it right now. Short week turnaround. You've got San Fran, then you've got that 11 days off before you come back home against Seattle. I don't think they were as bad as people thought on Sunday night, and I don't think they're as good as what we saw yesterday in the second half against an Arizona team that was really playing hard. So when you look at the Giants' offense, do you believe the truth lies somewhere in between with what we saw to open up the season and then what we saw Sunday in Arizona?
I definitely think there is like that middle ground there. I mean, granted, not having Saquon for 3 weeks is definitely going to hurt because that's a guy who had 23 touches in yesterday's game, and they kind of needed all those touches to get him back in this game. But I think for the Giants, it's going to come down to, because first week they just couldn't protect, right? They couldn't protect Daniel Jones, right? And that's where it's going to start at, especially going against San Fran. Can you protect Daniel Jones? And if you can kind of protect them, then you got a chance. And I think for the Giants, and I was kind of happy to see them do this, right? I was happy to see him push the ball down the field with Jalen Hyatt. Like, you
Let
have
him throw
to
it.
do that.
Let
Yes,
him
you have
throw
to.
it. He's making $40 million. You went out and his second half numbers, 17 to 21, 259. He was averaging 13 yards an attempt, 2 touchdowns, 8 rushes, 58 yards, and a touchdown. I'm telling you right now, that was Mahomes-esque. Like, he looked like an MVP quarterback for a half. He looked like that elite quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. You have to do that because now and when I saw him open up the second half, you go deep to Hyatt. Like, that's what you have to do because Gannon, he's seen Daniel Jones and Giants, a couple years now. He knows, all right, we stop the run game, slow him down. They're taking everything underneath, right? Waller will let him get his yards, but once you start, and I'm glad they figured out because there's no Buda Baker in the back end of the secondary. Like, go deep. You have Paris Campbell. You have Jalen Hyatt, guys that can stretch the field. Because once you do that now, the whole entire field is wide open to you. So I think for the Giants, like you said with Jones, you paid him this amount of money, like, gotta let it rip. Like, the guy that you have throwing it around the ball in the playoff game against Minnesota, like, you have to do it. You can't play this conservative dink and dunk. Like, you gotta open it up.
I'll tell you the concern though. I mean, the defense got gashed, and I watch pretty much every play. I go back, I'll watch the game multiple times, and I'll take my notes. Thibodeau right now, I'm not going to call him a bust, but he's beyond MIA. And I think people want to read into it where you're not going to get a lot of sacks from that position in Wink's defense, but you still have to be a disruptor. And sometimes you're taking yourself out of the plays. And it goes back to when we talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, the depth at key positions on the defensive side of the football. They win you games. So my concern for the Giants going forward is if you can't get to the quarterback, I don't really care what your offense is doing. Your defense is going to have to keep bailing you out. And if that's not the case, it's going to be it'll be a long season for him. All right, I want to get into some of these games, get your reaction with some of these games. Buffalo needed to win. They rebounded. Cincinnati needed to win. Burrow's banged up. And we know Lamar Jackson plays very well against Cincinnati throughout his career. And then you got the Chargers once again figuring out how to lose late. I feel like this is the same team we've seen over the last 5 years. Let's start with those 3 games. What stood out?
I think for Cincinnati, just them now being 0-2, and now the possibility of Joe Burrow, possibly having to miss a couple more games from an injury that he suffered all the way back. All the way back in the preseason. So, I mean, if you're a Bengals fan, I mean, you got to be kind of on pins and needles right now because the options behind them aren't great, right? You're talking about maybe Jake Browning started next week against a Rams squad who, for everybody that thought the Rams are going to be bad, the Rams actually might be somewhat good. And you're going in that situation. I mean, it's not looking good. And then Cincy's defense has given up some points too. to start the year, which is not great either.
When he tweaked it, what was it? He tweaked his calf, right, during
Yep.
training camp,
Mm-hmm.
and they just gave him all that money.
Yeah.
And I think he's a top 5 quarterback. I love Joe Burrow. But man, I believe that there are certain teams, uh, Buffalo is one of them, along with Cincinnati, where if not now, when, right?
Yeah.
Because Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Kansas City is not going anywhere. You've got all these
Nope.
upstart teams. I mean, and we can illustrate them, highlight them, but that's it's going to be a lot of pressure now on Cincinnati. I pulled up their schedule. Let's just say that's a nagging injury, right? So they've got the Rams, Tennessee. You go 0-4, and now you're at the point where if you lose to Arizona, which maybe they don't, or lose to Seattle, you're 1-5 going into bye in a very tough AFC North.
Yeah.
I mean, do I rip it up now or do I hold on to it?
You might gotta do the same thing that you mentioned about the
Hedge.
Jets. Like, make
Yeah.
that call, make a call to see about a quarterback. Like, because if this Burrow thing, if that calf is going to be a nagging issue, you might have to
But
call
you're not going to be
Carson
able to
Wentz.
get, and Jovan, it's funny you say that because I argue with people all the time. Go out and get this guy. They're just not going to pop up and understand the offense
No,
right away.
no, and that's another thing, right? Like, it's like damn if you do, damn if you don't, right? This where also pays to have a good backup quarterback that you can
But
kind of
that's
depend
why I
on.
that's why I think if Minnesota starts to lose some more games, and
Mm-hmm.
Cousins is a free agent,
Yeah,
so you really, I think the Jets. I'm not going to say Cincinnati if the kid's only going to miss a game or two. Think long
right.
term, he's young quarterback. But if you're the Jets and you had what you believe is a ready-made team now, and you just need a manageable quarterback, you have to replace the one you have back there. But yeah, Cincinnati might be in trouble. And then listen, Buffalo, you had the late issues against the early issues, I should say, against the Raiders, and then they settled in a little bit. I thought it was going to be one of those Josh Allen, here we go, turn the ball over all freaking
Mm-hmm.
afternoon. And they put up 38 points, man. I mean, I think that's a game that lets a lot of people know, and even the betting public, relax on the Bills,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, but yeah, 100% relax, and you got to give credit. Their run defense was, shut down Jacobs, even though he didn't carry the ball a lot, but still shut him down. And like you said, they look like the Bills team that we know, minus the Josh Allen turnovers. And that thing, that's like you said, that's all we remember. Like, this Bills team is good. It's just that you just always have to prepare for in the back of your mind the Josh Allen avalanche of turnovers. Like, he might have that game where he just those
Yeah.
2 interceptions and it completely just goes off the rails.
Yeah, pardon me, only sacked twice, 3 touchdowns, close to 300 yards, and they ran for $183. So, pardon me, that got the job done. Um, the Lions, it's funny, right? Because everyone was stamping their ticket for the Lions, and then quietly, Gino, who just makes the most perplexing friggin' play, scrambling around on third and forever. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? But then all of a sudden, boom, he hooks up with Lockett in overtime. And, that can be a season saving win early on for Seattle. And the Lions, we talked about this. Great offense, but it does you no good when you're giving up 35, 36, 37 points a game.
Yeah, and I think that again, I think it was fool's gold what we saw in week 1 from them defensively, because think about it, you're going against a Chiefs team that didn't have Travis Kelce. That's a huge part of that offense. And you had wide receivers dropping passes. So,
Tony, yep.
and granted, they did get to the quarterback, got an interception return, but then you go against a Seattle team that you probably should have beat because Geno Smith was without his 2 starting tackles. You would think you would try to get that win, but you give up 37. I think when they played last year, they gave up 45 to this same Seahawks offense. So not necessarily good, especially for, you did invest in the defense a little bit. You drafted a linebacker in Jack Campbell. You drafted Brian Branch. You added CJ Gardner-Johnson. You're going to have to tighten up because, 37, giving up 37 isn't going to win you much, even if your offense is playing as well as it can be. And now you also got to deal with the Lions, the David Montgomery injury too.
Yeah. I got to start leaning the Texans over the next 4 weeks.
Yeah.
They're not going to be favored against Jacksonville. They're not going to be favored
No.
against Pittsburgh. They're not going to be favored on the road against Atlanta, and they're not going to be favored against the Saints. Their first win possibly comes after their bye against Carolina.
Potentially. Yeah, I could see it.
Potentially. I mean, they
I
they
could see
might
it.
have a top 2 or 3 pick again.
Hey, you can draft Marvin Harrison Jr. to go
I
with
mean, can
CJ
you imagine
Stroud.
that? Stroud to Harrison Jr. for the next 10 years. I mean, the kid can play. And then
The
you had
Ohio State
Richardson making
connection.
some big, yeah, Richardson making some big plays yesterday for Indianapolis. So last night I'm watching the Sunday night game, right? And Joe Shad, who covers Miami, covers the Dolphins. He's so funny. I just think he's well respected, but he's definitely a troll on social media. And I laugh at it because he makes it a point to just always remind people Tua is still a very good quarterback. And now because
Right.
Rodgers goes down, Tua is the best quarterback in the AFC East, right? If you want to compare him, Allen. But Collingsworth made a fantastic point. He gets the ball out so fast. I look at Tua. I text my buddy during the game and I said, he's going to be that prolific passer if he stays healthy. He's going to put
Yes.
Marino-esque numbers. I'm not talking 28, 3,500 yards. I'm talking 43, 45, 5,000 yard seasons, 25 plus touchdowns. It's just the way they run that offense. I know they had a
Yes.
couple of self-inflicted wounds, but there was no chance in hell New England was winning that game because that quarterback sucks. Mac Jones is a bad quarterback. And I'm telling you, the hoodie is getting ready to just call it a day. But if right now, if I said take a flyer on Miami to win the AFC, would you?
Yeah, I would. I would. Even without Jalen Ramsey on the back end, like you said, that offense is just so explosive. And like you
Yep.
said, the things that we saw from this offense last year is totally different than what we saw when we're seeing now, because now we're seeing Tyreek Hill moving around in
Speed.
motion, Waddle moving around in motion. There's only so much you can do when those guys are
Raheem
flying
Mostert.
around. Like,
Yep.
yeah, Mostert's, found the fountain of youth. And that's another guy, right? When he's healthy, he's a solid running back. So if Tua can stay healthy, like you said, he gets the ball out fast, and they don't run no long developing plays, right? Because you don't need to, right?
It's
When you
just
got Hill and Waddle, just get it out of there. So I think it's just all about health, man, because we saw last year they almost beat the Bills in the playoffs, right? With a Skylar Thompson. And if that's Tua in that game, we're maybe
100%.
talking about the Dolphins playing, longer last year.
Yeah, he just needs to stay upright. Tonight, Monday Night Football, I love it. The owner of New Orleans said, man, I'll tell you, we haven't had a quarterback like this since Breeze. I mean, that's a shot at the water pistol. And my man Crablegs over there, they're laying 3 on the road against Carolina. And then I think the Steelers bounce back tonight at home, getting 2 against Cleveland. Thoughts on those 2 Monday night games?
Yeah, for me, I like the Saints to win against the win against the Panthers. I just feel like it's more so a bad matchup for Bryce Young. I mean, he had his moments against the Falcons, but 2 interceptions last week, throwing them both to Jesse Bates. Now he's going against a Saints defense that is way more talented than Falcons defense. I mean, you're talking about Cam Jordan, Marcus Lattimore, Demario Davis, all just on that 3 levels of defense. I think they get after him. I think, Derek Carr, unless he implodes, which we know is very possible, I think him in that passing game should be able to
That's a
take
low
advantage.
line.
It is.
New Orleans is laying 3 on the road. I thought they would at least get 3.5, 4.
Right. Exactly. And I mean, and that's the thing. Are they expecting maybe Carr to implode, or maybe Young to impress in his primetime debut? I think that's the big question there. And then for Browns, Steelers, I'm leaning Browns, but I know Mike Tomlin as an underdog is a very dangerous thing to bet against. Just ATS
You
wise,
can't
he's
you
pretty
can't
good.
go, not to cut you off, you can't go off of what they did against San Fran because their
Oh
defense
yeah,
is
100%.
phenomenal.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
There, what we saw in that game, and I think that's going to be telling too, is now you don't have no Deontay Johnson. Can this offense get on track against a Browns defense that made Joe Burrow and that offense look inept for most of that game? Now, granted, it was raining in that
Yeah.
game, but now can we trust Kenny Pickett to make those throws under pressure with Myles Garrett,
Browns
chasing
defense
after him in
good.
the backfield? Yeah.
Yeah. And remember too, though, right? We're waiting for that second. We always talk about the second year, the second season of the quarterback, right? And it's for Kenny Pickett right now. It's pretty critical. I just don't, I hate, it's very generic to say they find a win, but I can see last possession field goal going down the field. I mean, that's what you want to see with your young
Division game
quarterback.
too. You never know.
Yeah.
Division
Yeah.
game too. You never know.
Yeah. And Cleveland, you're looking around, you're saying, all right, Cincinnati might have some issues. We can start grabbing some games in the AFC North. By the way, going back to what you were saying, we talk about some of these young quarterbacks on the road. It's one of the reasons I don't want to say I didn't like. I was kind of torn between Green Bay and the Atlanta game because you've got these young quarterbacks starting on the road in 2 consecutive weeks, right? Love did it against Chicago. Don't get me started on Fields because I feel bad for that kid. I don't know if
Me
it's
too.
just
Me too.
I don't know. Is he that bad or it's the offensive line and it's just that franchise, the unwillingness to build around him? Because I thought they went out and they got him some weapons in the offseason.
Yeah, for me, I think it's more so. I don't think he's that bad. I still think he's making like those young mistakes, but I also feel like the offense isn't being tailored around him in this terms of play calling. I think I saw a tweet today from a Bears reporter out of Chicago where it said there's only been 4 design run plays called for Justin Fields, and that reminds me of what the Bears offense was before that Thursday night game against the Commanders last season, where it started to click. For this Bears offense to work, you have to get him going in the ground game because that will open up the pass game. And I feel like Luke Getsy, I feel like if we put Fields in the Eagle style offense, right? Or even what Shane Steichen is even doing with Anthony Richardson, because Anthony Richardson's, for as much talent he's had, everybody thinks he's a raw as a passer, but we're starting to see him make, plays. Do we get a better quarterback with him in those 2 offenses? Because it seems like Luke Getsy, who came from Green Bay, right? And what is he used to in Green Bay? He's not used to having a mobile quarterback that has the speed and athleticism and the arm. I think people forget Fields has an arm to make the plays. Is just somewhere it's not clicking. And then defensively for the Bears, just not clicking either.
I feel for the kid because he's been sacked 101 times. He's already been sacked 10 times.
That's David Carr-esque right there.
And what happens, right? You don't recover from that. You turn into that. And it almost kind of goes back to the Zach Wilson conversation, because if people want to have, back in the day, you would let these guys sit, right? You would let them sit for a year or 2 or 3. I mean, hell, how many years did Rodgers sit behind Brett Favre? And then finally, it was his time, right? He showcased that game against Dallas, Thursday Night Football, and all we talked about was, hey, this young quarterback can slide to his left, he can slide to the right, he can flick it. The rest is history with him. But if you look at the Jets, think about this for a moment. To some extent, it happened with Sanchez. It definitely happened with Darnold. It's definitely happening with Wilson. It's either malpractice on the franchise, even though Sanchez took him to 2 AFC championships. But again, that was more of the defense, was it not?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You're not surrounding these guys, these young players, these young quarterbacks with enough talent. And maybe some of them just aren't good. Like, I don't think, I can harken back where I know a clock is right twice a day or 2 times a day. I always thought Josh Rosen was going to be a bust. I looked at him. I said, this kid has bust written all over him. He is arguably, I mean, I don't even know if he's on a friggin' roster right now, to be honest with you.
Nah.
You would probably know more than I would, right? So, but Wilson, I think we're going to start having this conversation. Is Fields a bust? And I think the difference is because I get the sense the kid really wants to win, right?
Yes.
And I get the sense, I think he's pressing too much. I just think Wilson between the ears is just not there. I think he's soft mentally. Everything's been handed to him, and he's not a good quarterback. I don't want to see Fields midway through the season take punishment, get benched, because he's 23, 24. He's not going to respond. But yet we've got 3 young quarterbacks that were named starters as rookies going into the season, right? So now we're going to monitor all these guys, and we might be having a conversation about them in a year. It's tough, man, because 10 years ago, sit. Now, here you go. Here's the Duke. Here's
Yeah.
get out there and do what we're paying you to do. And it's tough, man. If I'm a young quarterback, I don't want to go to Chicago. I don't want to go to New York. Do I want to go to Cleveland? No. I mean, there's a couple of teams I would really want to steer clear of.
Yeah, no, and I think what you bring up is a great point, right? Because like you said, going back to the draft, even like 10 years ago, right? If a quarterback was drafted, right? Like you said, they're sitting, they're not starting. You have maybe that veteran incumbent quarterback who you're just paying for a year to see what he has, get you there for that bridge type of year. Like you said, now it's throw him into the fire and sees what happens. But then these quarterbacks get put in bad situations, right? Like Fields gets put in a horrible situation. What makes it worse is then people now are doing mock drafts saying, well, maybe you can send Drake May there, or you can send, this quarterback there. And it's like, it won't make a difference. Like,
no.
If some don't have the situation's bad, it's bad.
Some don't have the mental makeup, right? Again, Eli Manning, everyone wanted to run him and Coughlin out of town in 2007. And anyone that knows me has listened to me over the years. I was the biggest defender. But even there were games where I was like, what the hell are you doing? I never lost hope.
Yeah.
I was never like, get rid of the guy. But now it is, this guy sucks. This guy stinks. This guy can't read a defense. He's got a noodle arm. He doesn't know when to scramble.
Everybody's trying to write the book on these guys. And for a lot of these guys, like you said, this is their first professional, experience, or second year a professional. And it's not fair to do that because the NFL is not college. There's a learning and catching up that has to happen. But it's also an indictment on these franchises and these front offices and these coaches. You have to draft the guy that you feel like will fit your situation and you can model your game after, right? Like San Francisco, Trey Lance didn't work out, did no disservice, whatever. But they found a guy in Brock Purdy who, hey, we know how to work with these type of quarterbacks. We don't need them to be mobile. Hey, just be game manager, hit these throws, get the ball to your playmakers. It works. Kenny Pickett and the Steelers, right? We just need you to just move the ball. Don't do nothing crazy. Boom, just do it. Here we have guys with mobile quarterbacks. We don't know, right? With Fields, right? Getsy figures it out late last season, but now this season is not doing the same thing. Meanwhile, Steichen has come in and, hey, let's use Richardson to his best abilities. Hey, we need him to stay healthy, but let's do that. D'Amico Ryans in Houston, Stroud looked like he's going to be that guy. Even Doug Peterson last year, Urban Meyer totally just did not do Trevor Lawrence.
That's a great point.
And I think that's where it comes to pairing these guys with someone who that can just develop them and get them going. I don't know if Luke Getsy can develop Justin Fields, but if I put him with a Doug Peterson, maybe there's something there.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, and two, they also have to have it between the ears, right? You're investing so much, not only financially, but you're talking about the future of a franchise. If you miss on a quarterback, it will send your franchise back 10 years.
Yep.
And then you become the teams like Tampa years ago, Cleveland, Washington, the Jets, where you're drafting in the top 5. And again, I go back a couple of years ago, the conversation is, well, you just keep drafting a quarterback until you hit on one. And I'm like, but again, if you're pulling the trigger,
it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it's madness, right? It's doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. It's insanity. And you're just going to keep being that top 5 team that's going to stockpile all these picks. But I don't know, man. Listen, I know I got to let you go. Do you have any player props tonight?
Just Derek Carr over 1.5 touchdown passes. Again,
that's all it is. 1.5 tonight.
Yeah, 1.5 again, which was very puzzling, to me. I think I caught it at like minus 115, which again, I don't understand why. Just because you look at that Panthers team defense, they did not get no pressure last week in their game against the Falcons. And then you add on the fact no JC Horn in that secondary, Chris Olave, Mike Thomas. It was nice to see Mike Thomas be healthy and make some plays. You get those guys involved with Rashid Shaheed, who he's kind of developed that connection with going deep. I think Carr should be able to at least get 2 touchdown passes. He should.
Right. We shall see. He is Jovan Alfred at Jovan10, and give him a follow on social media. Does some good work with FTN Bets. He's got the totalsportslive.com, puts out some really good content. Give him a follow. He's always kind enough to join us on BYP. We'll do it later in the week. We'll start to look ahead to week 3. I feel as though we're going to blink and it's going to be 7-8 weeks into the friggin' season. I'm going to have notes. My Duke is going to be deflated. My Giants might be 2-5, but we will still try to give the viewers and the audience some good content as always. Appreciate you, pal.
Same.